So here we go again. We're here for the fourth session of the Science and Society talking about socio-ecological systems. I would like, as usual, to start thanking the reviewers of your papers, so the one who read them and assessed them, giving a lot of feedbacks, I'm sure. So thank you to Electra Atinayu from IC, Timothée Cook from Blue Seeds, Florence Lacrosse from Coral Guardian, Emna Alimi from the Med Funds, Florina Jacob, also from Coral Guardian, and Robin Morland from the Association for Coastal Ecosystem Services. Today, so for the jury, we will have online Guillaume Leport, only joining in the second part of this session, Emna Alimi from the Med Fund, Florence Lacrosse again from Coral Guardian, Luisa Mangelajo from Université Côte d'Azur Écossise, and Aziz Moula, a newcomer that you don't know yet. He's from the Ruder Bosch-Pevic Institute. So I think you're all set and ready. Yes, so we can start with you, Sophia, and then we'll have Oceane, Amy, and Gabriela this afternoon. As I say, it's to combine social science and ecology. We'll go to Italy, Ecuador, French Polynesia, and Mayotte. The floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my thesis defense. So because I'm the first one to start the social science section, I would like you to get a bit of a change of perspective. Just imagine to step in someone else's shoes that doesn't know anything about marine biology. And this person sees this picture, the sea surface. And it's a place, it's an entry to the underwater world where you can't breathe, you struggle to just keep floating, and if you go in the depths, the pressure can crush you. So how do we convince this person that protecting the ocean actually matters and it is important for planetary health? Well, to answer this question, I reflected on my own experience and the fact that marine biology is not just like my topic of studies, it's also an essential ecosystem for my life, and I developed a very strong emotional connection with it. And this brought me to the topic of my thesis, the role of nature connectedness from marine direct experience to environmental action. There is a growing body of knowledge about the marine ecosystem, as we saw through this week with all your amazing researches. Although that we know that the sea is a vulnerable ecosystem, it needs protection, it is essential for planetary health. So why do we still struggle to protect it so much? Well, maybe our effort should be directed also into public engagement, because as ocean conservationists, we also need to go over another threshold, which is the fact that the ocean is perceived as largely invisible for many people, because ecological processes happen out of sight, and this brings to have a physical and psychological distance from this environment that limits meaningful connection with the sea. So we do need to try to bridge this gap in order to have effective public engagement. The traditional way that we raised awareness throughout these years is basically information-based. So I try to spread the information about my research the best way I can with the public. But actually, many articles of environmental psychologists show that this doesn't really bring to long-term environmental engagement. So we should look into different pathways, such as direct experiences with the sea, more emotional engagement, which brings to develop a sense of belonging to foster human-nature relationships. And so this brought to my research question. So can direct marine experiences with the sea foster stronger nature connectedness and environmental engagement? Well, I performed my study in a company that is set in the marine area of marine protected area of Portofino. It's called OutB. It's not only an outdoor sports center, they also carry out many citizen science projects, and environmental awareness. And I've been working for them in these 6 months. To explain a bit better my train of thoughts, I developed this conceptual framework, which is a method used in environmental psychology in order to find a way to predict pro-environmental behavior, which is very complex because influenced by many factors. So here I have my input, direct marine experiences, in particular through water sports such as swimming, kayaking, surfing. And here I have my wanted outcome, so pro-environmental behavior. And there's the steps in between. So imagine I go the first time in my life kayaking. I really enjoyed this experience. I actually have a very positive emotional response, which is the restorative response that makes me go again and again and again. This brings to have nature, or in particular, ocean connectedness. So develop a relationship with this environment. And there is where I start making observation, noticing changes, such as scientists do. And it brings to interest-based knowledge, which is shown to be much more effective and long-lasting than information-based knowledge. Because without knowledge, it's really hard to achieve then pro-environmental behavior, because you kind of have to know what's the right thing to do. And the way I gathered my data was using a mixed method approach. I used a questionnaire for the quantitative analysis and interviews for qualitative analysis. With the questionnaire, I gathered 133 responses, but I just analyzed 119 because we're the people that were marine sports practitioners. As you can see here, I had a quite good representation of the demographic, almost 50% male and female, and an age range spanning from 20 to 72 years old. The way I structured my questionnaire was using 3 different psychological scales and a marine biology knowledge assessment that I developed. The psychological scales are the connectedness to nature scale developed by Meyer and Franz in 2004, which measures the way a person can feel part of an ecosystem. The perceived restoration scale that was developed by Professor Rita Berto in 2005, and she adapted to the marine environment on purpose for my study. Last, pro-environmental behavior scale that was adapted in Italian by Menardo and al. In 2020. This one in particular, I wanted it to be very recent because it's assessed different sustainable behavior that span from very simple ones to maybe more advanced, such as donating money for conservation. The data analysis was carried out by assigning scores to each section. For the interviews, instead, I interviewed 6 participants using semi-structured interviews. And the purpose of it was to get a bit more insight on the relationship with the sea and the marine sport practice. Plus, I also reproposed some questions that were found in the survey because I had very heterogeneous answers, and therefore I wanted to understand a bit better how these questions were perceived by the participant. The data analysis was done recording all the interviews. I did a verbatim transcription, and then I carried out a thematic analysis, which highlights recurring themes in all the interviews. And let's go to the results. I was really pleased to see that I managed to gather my target population too of highly marine engaged people with a very frequent interaction with the sea. In fact, over the total sample, 89% were marine sports practitioners. And in this graph here, you can see that 70% of the respondents were going to the sea either every day or at least once a week, which is amazing. And here you get the percentage of life spent going to the sea. 40 people out of the 119 were going for their whole life every day to the sea. My best result out of the questionnaire was actually the fact that I had a very high correlation between the nature connectedness scores and the pro-environmental behavior, showing that this could actually be a very strong predictor of pro-environmental behavior. And this result is also confirmed by further literature. I carried out the same statistical test to see if knowledge might predict pro-environmental behavior, and it did fail in this case. Then let's go to the restoration part with the perceived restoration scale that had a mean score of 4.3 out of 5, which means that all the participants consistently perceived the marine environment as highly restorative. Restorative meaning that it helps to restore your mental energies, kind of like taking a break from everyday life. And passing on to the interview results, 4 main themes came up, such as the feeling of belonging. Many interviewees were talking about the sea as their home, as an essential place where to go to, and that they struggle to live without it. Then learning through experience was another very important theme, because actually they were telling me how the repeated and frequent experience show them and make them notice the changes in the environment. They learned marine processes because they were just in the sea, directly watching them, because actually it's really hard to understand what's going on underwater if you lived your whole life on land. Then restoration is a recurring theme that is also reflected with the perceived restoration scale. And mainly people were making an example on how they feel their mind brightened after going to the sea, how they needed to just calm their mind and take a break from the stressful everyday life. Another very interesting theme that is important also for the kind of job we do at OutB is the role of guided experiences. Because maybe if it is your first interaction with the sea, you can be scared. And having a person that is comfortable in that environment can actually show you how to interact with it in the most correct way. Mostly if we're doing it in a marine protected area, it can be very important. And I wanted to bring you as an example, one thing that came up during the interviews. There was one participant that is a surfer, and for many years did surfing. And she decided to carry out a bachelor in marine biology, just because she started getting passionate about the sea through the sport she practiced. And instead, another one that was doing marine biology, she decided to then start doing water sports to observe firsthand what she was studying. This to show that there's no linear causal pathway to knowledge, but it's more of a bi-directional experience, and it plays with experience, just curiosity and knowledge. So kind of goes against my conceptual framework, but I was really happy to see that it works this way. And then let's go to the discussion. I cannot make any claims, unfortunately, but we can trace a line between all the results. As we have a sample pool of all marine sport practitioners that show to have a very high nature connectedness, and we could see that nature connectedness is a strong predictor of pro-environmental behavior, we can start using marine outdoor activities as a tool to raise awareness and gathering knowledge about how this can have an effect, a long-term effect, on also the behavior of the practitioners. The fact that knowledge alone is not a strong predictor tells us a lot about the way we've been raising awareness in the past years. And maybe we should try to find a differentiated technique in order to foster this repeated interaction with the sea, stimulate curiosity and experiential learning, which seems to have a much stronger effect on people perception. And in particular, as I said before, guided marine experience might represent this effective pathway that can be used for ocean literacy and public engagement. Restoration and well-being could be that key element that brings people to have repeated interactions, supporting the conceptual framework, but should be further discussed as well-being is a very complicated topic. And of course, in my study, I had lots of limitations because unfortunately, I could not include a comparison group because it would create too much noise in my data. So it was actually wanted. And because all the survey are based on self-reported measures, this limits the causal inference of my results. Although I would like to highlight the practical implication of the survey itself, because I found out that it can be used as a tool for social impact assessment of educational activities. For example, if you carry out an environmental project and you want to assess the social impact that this activity had on the participants, you could use my questionnaire that it's highly adaptable because it's subdivided into sections. So I'm running out of time, but I just would like to finish with the quote of Sir David Attenborough that guided me through the thesis. So no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Sofia. Thank you. I would like also to thank Chiara Quartero, who's your supervisor.
The whole office is watching, actually.
So thank you for the whole office at Outbeen in Italy. For the questions, we'll go first with Luisa, going to Aziz after. Just let it here.
I start?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for this very nice presentation, very clear, very well organized. And I enjoyed the results because I think they are very interesting. Let's start from the last one. So what one of the more striking results of your presentation, to my opinion, is this link, or no link, in between the knowledge and the experiences. It's very interesting because apparently going to the sea is more important for the connectedness than having knowledge, which probably, I mean, is enough going in the field. But what would you improve for this? What would you try to do eventually to try to? This means the people that also don't have a lot of knowledge can enjoy and be sensibilized by going in the field and having experiences. And what do you think it could be done to also make these people have more knowledge and eventually spread it and increase also this? Do you think it's important to do this, or there's no need?
No, I think it's essential because I don't want to mean it that if someone goes to the sea every day, then we'll protect it and will gather knowledge about it. But I do think that experience allows you to understand how the ecological processes work. Because if you don't see them, it's really hard to grasp their mechanisms. And even just the fact that nutrients flow into the water. Like, we have to imagine it in a completely different way. And for example, now, like, bringing a lot of people at sea and doing environmental awareness, because like that's what we do during the activities, showed me that even concepts that I would have thought everyone knew are not so well known. And for example, in my assessment, I saw that ocean acidification is not known by most people, or what alien species are, even species in the identification. But then just meeting this community of outdoor practitioners, I saw that they started gathering knowledge on their own because they were asking themselves questions about what they saw in the sea.
So what do you think could be the role of this? It's an
Guide.
NGO, no? Where you worked.
It's a
NGOs,
benefit corporation,
benefit,
like
yeah?
small medium.
What something also very practical, eventually, what they could do to help these people to find the knowledge they are looking for?
Well, social media do have a role because, for example, I saw it worked, and I don't know if you mean also through the guided experiences, because like this is the best way we can do it. Not only also transferring ecological knowledge, but also sociocultural of the place, which helps just putting everything into perspective of how the environment has been used through the last decades. For example, Portofino was a place where they harvested red coral. And we can say, okay, now there's not anymore. And
or something also was thinking eventually, as they are frequenting the sea, something on the beach or a QR code? Or
yeah, we have actually from the Anterdorn Zoological Station a poster about Posidonia and how it helps the nutrient cycling, and you shouldn't be afraid of it if it's on the beach. And there's a QR code to help measure the perspective of people about Posidonia.
Do we have time for?
We can go.
Okay, go. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Risa. We can go to Aziz and then to Emma.
Very nice presentation. Thank you. So the main aim of this is to test, is your connectedness dependent on your knowledge of the environment? No. What's the overall aim of this?
If the direct experiences can bring you to have connectedness and then pro-environmental behavior. It's actually pro-environmental behavior that I'm interested into. Yeah. I wanted to test if knowledge also was a good predictor.
For me, I don't see much difference in knowledge and experience, though. I mean, if we look at indigenous populations, I don't think working with indigenous populations in Taiwan, you knowledge is something you realize. You have knowledge of something, but actually your experience leads to knowledge. People going to the sea every single day, they notice things, and that is knowledge. You know what I mean? So there are many different ways that you can get your knowledge from, not just we know this is Posidonia, blah 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 blah. So yeah.
Actually, with this mentality,
this is something difficult to test. That's what I'm saying.
I built the marine biology assessment part because I didn't want them to identify a species. I just wanted to know, for example, do you know if this jellyfish is native or alien? Which is a bit more broader, and it can be based on experience rather than reading papers. Or are they aware about how the ocean is connected to extreme weather patterns, or like absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere? Like, how much about the overall ecological processes and marine issues do they know about?
Okay.
So it wasn't too academic.
I have a question. A few years ago, I remember reading a paper about, especially in Europe, it's really difficult to do studies like this across borders because in your crazy languages, you have masculine, feminine, and they have very different meanings. So this was just done in Italy, in one location.
No, I actually had 30% of European and non-European respondent, because it was in Italian and English.
Okay, so did you see any differences in how people?
I tested it, and there was no actual difference. The only one is that the European and extra-European did work in the marine-related field. I wonder why. Like,
I mean, it is a major limitation of your study that you only asked people in the marine.
it wasn't that high, the percentage
It is 89%, right?
of the fact that marine sport practitioners.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought people
Yeah.
that worked in the marine.
So, are there any results that you found that you think are surprising, or yeah, or how do, maybe I can reframe the question. If you were to ask 50% of marine people and non-marine people, what do you think would be the differences between these?
Maybe in the way they would answer the questionnaire, because as if the self-reported measures, I think that someone that is in the academic world will start to think about, okay, what's the framework behind the questions? And how do I answer to it? Thinking already of what kind of analysis I would do. Instead, people that are not in the field maybe would just answer more honestly. And I saw this through the interviews a lot.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. And can you go back to the framework, the really nice decision tree? Yeah. So this one in the middle here, the key mediator, the nature connectedness, and sensor. So is this testable? You know, that this is the mediator. Where was this drawn from? Was it from literature, or did you just?
It was from literature.
Mm-hmm.
Although I tried to test it. One with those 13 respondents that did not do marine sports, but it wasn't enough. And I tried to relate it to the frequency of interaction with the sea, although the results I had were very similar, and they didn't allow me for any significant result. Yeah. But that's why I would love to collect data on people that do not practice marine sports and do not have a frequent interaction with it.
Okay. And all the experiences that people were speaking about, or maybe you asked about how you used the sea or whatever, they're all positive, right? Are there any negative experiences you included in it? Would negative experiences lead to unconnectedness?
I didn't put it in the questionnaire, but like I'm trying to think about the interviews if something came up.
It's okay if not.
It's like no, because I remember there was a very long interview with a person that does solo navigation with a sailboat, and he was telling me about the fact that you need to fear the sea in order to relate with it. And it wasn't in a negative sense, but it was something that he reported many times.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe we can go to you, Emma, and come back.
Yes. Thank you, Christophe. Thank you for your nice presentation. It was very clear and easy to follow. The one question that comes to my mind when listening to you is the marine protected area of Portofino. There is a marine protected area in your study area, or like your study area is embedded with the marine protected area, or it is outside?
Wait, I think I'm muted. No, you're not.
No, you're not muted. I can
sorry, I just saw it on the screen.
No problem.
So most of the respondents were from the area, and the company is based there. And all the guided tours we do and the projects are placed in the marine protected area.
Great. So how would you link the fact that your study area or your respondents are within a marine protected area framework, or might be already as stakeholders of this marine protected area for many, many years? Like, how did you account that, or not?
I did not take it into account because my objective was to gather as many responses as possible, also from people outside of this area, although I did think about it. from just the experience of the people I met staying there, I would say that the marine protected area has a very strong influence on the local population. They do enjoy to experience it. And I think there's a lot of people that do marine sports because they have such a nice area where they can do it.
Okay. Okay, and how do you quantify if your awareness raising is working or not? Because you spoke about it, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
But what is the indicator that allows you to say that your awareness raising worked or not?
In this case, I would use pre-post surveys to the activity, and mainly through activities that last at least a week. So what I would do is repropose the same questionnaire after the activity with some modification to assess if the data I gathered at the beginning of the activities improved or not at the end of it. For example, if the connectedness to nature is higher or if their ecological knowledge increased. And in fact, I developed a questionnaire for a summer school on a sailboat where they do marine biology. And they're using it right now to assess the activities they do on the kids that are going to the summer camp.
Okay, thank you. No more questions, Christophe.
Okay, now, Florence.
Hi, well done, Sophia. Thanks for your presentation. I guess my questions can maybe focus more, if you could come back to slide 9, I think it was, where you detailed the different psychological scales. There are 3 that you got inspired by. Yes, I was wondering if you could detail your process of going through these. Were there any strengths or limitations to these different scales?
Well, I didn't really get inspired by them. I used the exact scale because if you apply some modification, it's not valuable anymore because they had to carry out a research in order to develop it, and it has to be from a published paper. And the limitation was that they're not about the sea. There's actually no psychological scale that I know of that is adapted to the sea. So at the beginning, I thought that, for example, nature connectedness could have been reframed to the marine environment, but then I prefer to just keep it unmodified, and instead the Professor Ritaberto provided me with a sea adapted for the perceived restoration. But she's an environmental psychologist, and so it was validated by her. Also for the pro-environmental behavior, at the beginning, for example, I made questions about the pro-environmental behavior correlated to the sea, which weren't strong because I made them up. That's what they told me. And so having a validated scale gave strength to my results. And I can also compare it with others, even though it wasn't so easy.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. That's great. Between the different scales, combining them together for studies, do you know if there are any other studies that had done that before?
It is a method used for this kind of surveys. Pro-environmental behavior and connectedness to nature scale, not exactly this scale of pro-environmental behavior, but it's been used for a study. And that's why I know that it was already a predictor.
Okay, great. And my final question was regarding the different interview themes that you highlighted during your study. Was there a specific method you went about to highlight these themes, to analyze them?
Just by finding the recurring themes. I went through all of them already when doing the interviews. I was trying to think about what themes came up. And then I used color coding for highlighting all the different steps. And also, what was not shown in the presentation is that not always are recurring themes. sometimes it's just one person that says something that is really interesting for the study. And I included this, for example, in my thesis, in the report.
Okay, well done. Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes if you want to open questions. Andrea?
Thank you so much, Sophia. I really like this presentation. I wanted to ask you, like I've done these open water swimming, right? And I was thinking, like when I went there, like if you go to this ocean man, like massive competition in the ocean, you would encounter with maybe like 200, 300 people doing this swimming competition. And when I went there, I thought I would like, well, maybe it was like my perception, but I felt like not many people were like connected with the ocean, even though they practice this sport. And I feel that a bit sometimes when you see like triathlons, you know, people still do these activities in the ocean. But I would say like, what would you think, or like maybe do you think it would be like interesting running these actually, like running your questionnaire in these type of activities that are more like kind of like massified, and yeah, it's like you're not directly connecting with nature, but you're just performing another. Yeah.
Actually, there's a very interesting paper that compared it not on the marine environment, but compared mountain guides to rafting guides. So a very fast sport with a slower type of outdoor activity. And it showed how the environmental perception and awareness can change according to the fact that are you going there to enjoy nature or to do a competition against yourself. So I do think though that if you go practice for that competition every day in the sea, you will start noticing patterns and observing it in a different way. But yes, it is true that it depends on how you interact with it, and that's why it's important to also have guided experiences.
Because, for example, like I know some people, and in my case, when I did my competition, it was the second time I swim in the ocean. Like because you practice in the pool, but then you just do the competition in the ocean. So yes, also like it would be interesting developing in this scenario. No?
It's interesting as you say. I jump on that to do some advertisements for us. Sorry, it did that a few weeks ago. We were with Christelle in Brittany to a very famous sailing school called Les Glénans. So it's very famous in France, at least. They train thousands of sailors, and they ask us to use our game MARRES. So we provided a lot of boxes because they realized that a lot of the kids they were coming from cities in France, big ones, the capital, and that they were going there more over the water, over the sea, but not really that much interested to know what was underwater. So they wanted now to include that exactly.
Sorry, I would think you need money. The study would do really well, like on a geographic like kind of gradient as well, because I mean, I know people in the UK who live very close to the sea and have zero interest in it, and obviously in the Mediterranean, we use the sea in an entirely different way. I would also say, and kind of agreeing with Andrea, I'm probably an anomaly as well. I don't feel that much connection to the sea. It's terrible, I know, but I know it's true.
Let's go snorkeling together.
But the knowledge part of it is interesting for me. Like the knowledge of it, but I don't feel a connection.
We are having a nice discussion. I have a friend who is an oceanographer. My friend is an oceanographer. He loves modeling. He doesn't like being at the sea. He loves being with his computer. Yeah. But maybe we can go back to another question because they do love the sea.
For me, the most interesting website was, you said there was a contradicting your framework, that not only people that experience can be wanting to contribute to ocean conservation, but also ocean conservationists can be interested in the sea. Clearly not us, but but did you differentiate, or could you differentiate, or did you go further into that? Because also going to adding to the geographical aspect, I think the sampling and that maybe if you were to carry out the survey again in the future, and you more strategically, you have the control group, you have, I mean, I guess we're all in a bubble. You're in a bubble in the MPA, you're in a bubble of MARRES, so we're all conservationists that, you know, if you ask me that I do surf, I did surf before, but also I'm much more connected to the ocean through the studies. So how did you take this into account, or how would you take it into account?
Okay, it's a very long question. Well, I don't know like how I would take it into account, because with the survey it has to be standardized kind of. So it's then tricky to just get this very detailed data, and that's what came up with the interviews, for example. So maybe more interviews would be useful. But a technique I could use to get out of my bubble would be to just walk around with the QR code and just ask people to do my survey in different geographical areas, for example, or going into a city and propose it in the same way, which wasn't possible to do this time. And I also used the network of marine sports centers that Outby had to share my survey, because at the end I wanted to get the target population pool. But my initial idea was to just print out the QR code and go around.
There is another question I had in mind. You haven't talked that much about the age effect. As Emily says online, we could imagine that's two ways possible. The more you get older, the more you have the chance to be in contact with the sea. So does it
I tried to run the test to see if that could have been meaningful, but unfortunately I did not have that many respondents that were like in the different age ranges to have meaningful statistical tests. It would be very interesting.
So maybe more on the sense of what you got when you were talking with these 60, 70-year-old people, the way they were connected to the sea, was it more, so maybe not because of knowledge they knew from the social media, but maybe because of the experience, the stories they had?
Yeah, and also they had the perception of the historical baseline. So they saw the sea changing, and that was very important to them, because they could actually see the effects of climate crisis.
Okay. Sorry, we have to shorten at some point the questions. Thank you a lot, Sofia. Bravo. No. Yes. So now we're heading to Galapagos. Yes, Ecuador, to talk about sharks and money. With Ocean Barcelona, and I would like to thank Gabriela Viana, supervisor from the Charles Darwin Foundation in Galapagos. The floor is yours.
When you think of Galapagos, you probably picture the extraordinary wildlife encounters. Perhaps you've seen the images of hundreds of scalloped hammerhead sharks. Now, imagine you've just come back from a dive in Galapagos. How much would you be willing to donate to help protect these sharks? What if on your dive you'd seen hundreds of sharks? What if you'd seen 3? Would your answer be different? Hi, my name is Ocean Barcelona, and today I'll be presenting my thesis on the funding potential of shark watching tourism in Galapagos and factors influencing willingness to donate. Shark tourism is a growing industry worldwide, generating economic benefits through non-extractive uses. In 2013, the industry was estimated to cater to over 500,000 participants annually. And evidence shows that the economic value generated through tourism can exceed that derived from fisheries. For example, in Palau in 2010, it generated over $18 million for tourism, compared to $10,800 if the same shark populations had been harvested through fisheries. These non-extractive uses are gaining importance in the context of global population declines, with 36% of all shark and ray species currently threatened with extinction, and overfishing being identified as the main cause. These declines can result in a loss for both the tourism sector as well as local livelihoods. In this context, marine protected areas emerge as key management tools for conserving marine biodiversity, balancing conservation and extractive uses, especially in areas where tourism and fisheries coexist. The Galapagos Marine Reserve, or GMR, is a multiple-use MPA with a marine zoning system, balancing extractive and non-extractive uses. In 2024, the archipelago received over 270,000 visitors, many attracted to the island by their status as the world's best marine tourism destination. In fact, the marine tourism industry in 2014 generated over $150 million, accounting for 58% of all tourism revenues. Part of this revenue comes from an entrance fee, a mandatory entrance fee paid to the Galapagos National Park, which goes towards the marine reserves and the park's operating budget. Sharks are a main driver of tourism in Galapagos, with over 30 species that can be seen through snorkeling or diving activities that can range from single day trips to multiple day liveaboards. Evidence shows that shark watching tourism is estimated to generate more than 10 times the revenue generated by artisanal fisheries in the area, and conservation is therefore a management priority, with shark fishing being banned since 1989. However, sharks still remain some of the most frequently captured taxa in illegal artisanal longlining. It is therefore essential to identify possible sources of conservation funding. Positive shark watching experiences can foster positive attitudes and increase support for conservation initiatives. In this context, willingness to pay and willingness to donate studies are used to evaluate tourist motivations and help set acceptable price points, serving as tools to design financing strategies. These are sometimes combined with measures of conservation to help understand the drivers behind financial support. In Galapagos, previous studies have looked at willingness to pay for broader conservation initiatives or willingness to donate to specific species. However, little is known about visitors' willingness to contribute to shark conservation or the role that satisfaction has to play in shaping this support. This study will therefore quantify tourists' willingness to donate for shark conservation in Galapagos, investigating drivers and mechanisms, and evaluating the potential of shark watching tourism to generate direct conservation funding for shark populations. Galapagos is located about 1,000 kilometers off of mainland Ecuador in the eastern tropical Pacific, and it has 4 inhabited islands. Its waters are protected by the Galapagos Marine Reserve, funded in 1998. Data for this study was collected through surveys conducted between June 2023 and May 2024 at the 2 airports connecting Galapagos to mainland Ecuador, Seymour Ecological Airport on Baltra Island and San Cristobal Airport on San Cristobal Island. The surveys were administered to divers and snorkelers, and they were asked questions about their motivations to visit Galapagos, their expectations and satisfaction with shark tourism experiences, spending information, willingness to donate, and general demographics information. The people who were surveyed were divided into 3 groups based on their participation with shark tourism and their motivations to visit Galapagos. So firstly, we have casual shark visitors, which are those who mentioned sharks as a motivation to visit and engaged in shark tourism. However, they would have still visited Galapagos if there were no sharks to be sighted. On the other hand, dedicated shark visitors were those who came to Galapagos specifically for sharks and would not have visited Galapagos otherwise. And lastly, non-shark visitors were those who did not cite sharks as a motivation to visit and did not participate in any shark tourism activities. Out of the 1,083 survey responses collected, 47% were non-shark visitors, 44% casual shark visitors, and 9% dedicated shark visitors. The expectations and satisfactions with shark tourism were assessed using 3 variables: shark abundance, quality of interaction, and variety of sharks. From these, 2 indices were created. Results revealed that dedicated shark visitors had significantly higher expectation and satisfaction scores compared to casual shark visitors. Out of the 3 attributes, shark abundance was revealed to be the most highly correlated to satisfaction, with the regression analysis confirming it as a significant predictor of satisfaction. We then looked at the gaps between the expectation and satisfaction. And they revealed overall small but positive gaps, so indicating that visitors were generally satisfied with their experiences. By profile, casual shark visitors also had positive gaps for all 3 attributes, once again indicating that their experiences exceeded their expectations. However, despite being more satisfied overall, dedicated shark visitors had a negative gap specifically for shark abundance, indicating that their expectations of this specific attribute were not met, and this was significantly different from casual shark visitors. When asked about their willingness to donate, 73% of participants were willing to contribute to shark conservation, with a median of $20. Of the 27% not willing to participate, the mainly cited reasons were that experiences were already too expensive and that the mandatory entry fee should already cover conservation costs. Dedicated shark visitors had the highest percentage of zero willingness to pay at 37%, and this visitor group specifically cited that they wanted to know where their money went. The drivers' leading willingness to donate were then analyzed using a hurdle model, using a logistic regression for participation and a log normal model for positive willingness to donate. Responses revealed that dedicated shark visitors were significantly less likely to contribute, with a 58% lower probability of participating. On the other hand, highest income earners were significantly more likely to participate. Among respondents participating, however, no explanatory variable significantly influenced the amount contributed. Using the hurdle model, we then calculated the expected willingness to donate of each visitor profile. With a high probability of donating and high amount, casual shark visitors had an overall expected willingness to donate of $29. On the other hand, with a lower probability of donating, dedicated shark visitors had an expected willingness to donate of $22. If we then scale these estimates to the full visitor population, casual shark visitors could contribute 4.25 million and dedicated visitors 0.66 million to shark conservation yearly. When we then account for the return likelihood of each profile, this number increases, and it gives us a combined total of $7.8 million for shark conservation in Galapagos every year. This funding would complement the current socioeconomic benefits already generated by shark tourism in Galapagos, which in 2023 generated over $75 million for the local economy and supported around 1,900 jobs. By quantifying these visitor donations, this study positions visitor-based funding as a viable and scalable mechanism for generating direct conservation support. Overall support was high at 73%. However, it varied by profile, with 28% of casual visitors and 37% of dedicated having a zero willingness to donate, and citing the high cost of visiting Galapagos as the main barrier to donation. Similar patterns have been observed at Cocos Island, where 45% of visitors were not willing to donate to conservation, despite citing sharks as their main reason to visit. On the other hand, in lower-cost destinations like Malaysia, 90% of tourists were willing to donate to shark conservation. This indicates that although most visitors are still willing to contribute, willingness to donate may be context-dependent and limited by high baseline costs. Although satisfaction was not a predictor of willingness to donate, visitor motivation was, with dedicated shark visitors being significantly less likely to contribute. This contrasts previous findings, which suggest that familiarity with a species is associated with a higher willingness to donate, suggesting that emotional responses to experience may actually play a more important role. In fact, a possible explanation for this lower participation rate may be the strong relationship between expectations and satisfactions identified for this visitor group. Evidence shows that stronger attachments to a subject can actually amplify negative emotional responses to perceived shortcomings. And in a tourism context, this dissatisfaction may be linked to a reduced behavioral support, including monetary donations. Therefore, this gap between expectations and the realized experience of dedicated shark visitors for shark abundance is identified as an area where targeted intervention could enhance visitor satisfaction and therefore potential funding. A possible reason for this mismatch may be a perceived decrease in hammerhead shark abundance, with current experiences not meeting the historical image of the archipelago. Another possible reason may be the highly publicized images of peak hammerhead shark aggregations at Darwin and Wolf Island, influencing visitor expectations. Studies show that, in fact, exposure to idealized wildlife media can elevate expectations. Therefore, addressing this mismatch through improved pre-trip communication and by accurately framing the variability of shark encounters can help align expectations with ecological reality. This may therefore reduce this gap, improving visitor satisfaction and strengthening willingness to donate. But how can we actually collect this money? So, practical mechanisms can be informed by research on donation behavior. Firstly, the timing of a request is more important than the frequency, and it's most effective when it's closer to the point of experiences. Therefore, visitors could be asked to donate directly after their shark tourism experience, or in any case before leaving Galapagos. Secondly, framing and transparency, so clearly communicating the use of funds and showing progress towards a visible goal. This is especially relevant in this study, as dedicated shark visitors specifically said that they wanted to know where their money went. And thirdly, emotional engagement, as empathy towards a species influences willingness to donate. Therefore, combining well-timed, transparent donation requests with storytelling, conservation messaging, and dive briefings that highlight the vulnerability of shark populations could strengthen willingness to donate and help capture conservation funding. Several limitations should be taken into account when looking at these findings. Firstly, stated willingness to donate often overestimates actual donations. Responses can be influenced by factors such as social desirability or the warm glow effect, whereby people express support for conservation without necessarily intending to donate as a way to feel good with themselves. Nonetheless, willingness to donate remains a widely accepted approach for analyzing environmental funding mechanisms for conservation. Secondly, estimated funding potential should be viewed as dynamic. The surveys were conducted during a moment of exceptionally high tourism in Galapagos, and of course, the final total funding potential is directly dependent on the number of visitors. In addition, the entry fee was raised in 2024 after the survey was conducted from $100 to $200, further posing as a possible barrier to donation. Therefore, the value identified should be interpreted as a reference point rather than an absolute annual value. But despite these limitations, we still identified a substantial amount of funding. So what can we do with this money? Well, importantly, this funding has the potential to support shark conservation beyond the boundaries of the Galapagos Marine Reserve. This is especially important for scalloped hammerhead sharks, which generate 25% of shark tourism revenues in Galapagos, yet are critically endangered. Although they are protected within the GMR, these sharks undertake predictable cyclical migrations across the eastern tropical Pacific, where they remain vulnerable to fishing. The risk is especially pronounced for female hammerheads, who have been seen to migrate to Panama to give birth, where shark fishing is still relatively common and juveniles are still frequently captured. Unlike government-managed funds, these visitor-derived contributions are not restricted to a single jurisdiction. This means that money that has been collected in Galapagos could actually go towards supporting conservation initiatives in Panama, like alternative livelihood programs, fisheries management, or community-based conservation approaches, therefore reducing unsustainable shark fishing while improving the long-term socioeconomic sustainability of the local populations. This offers an opportunity to act at an ecologically relevant transboundary scale, addressing challenges that cannot be managed through localized protection alone. In addition, this aligns with the recent uplisting of scalloped hammerheads to CMS Appendix 1, which highlights the need for coordinated conservation effort across species migratory ranges. This study extends the existing work on the economic value of shark watching tourism by looking at how visitor funding could directly contribute to protecting shark populations. Visitor contributions were estimated to generate $7.8 million annually for shark conservation in Galapagos. And this funding, importantly, has the potential to operate beyond jurisdictional boundaries. At the beginning of this presentation, I asked you whether your experience in Galapagos would influence how much you're willing to donate to shark conservation. Our findings show that it probably would. Therefore, realizing this potential depends on addressing the current constraints to willingness to donate, and in parallel, implementing practical mechanisms for securing these funds. Overall, these findings position visitor-based funding as a mechanism to bridge the gap between the economic value generated by shark watching tourism and the financial resources required for effective shark conservation. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank my supervisor, Gabriel Viana.
Thank you, Ocean. So for this round of questions, we're going to go the other way around compared to Sophia. So we'll start with you, Florence, and then going with him now.
Yes, great. Thank you. Well done for your presentation. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm going to start my first question with your choice of survey location. What are the pros and cons of doing this at an airport?
So I will say that the survey was collected before I joined the team, and it has been used to inform several papers that have been written and are being written. So what I've presented is only a part of this massive survey. But the idea was to be able to capture the wide variety of people visiting Galapagos, including people who come for liveaboard trips. So for example, the airport is kind of the only place you would be able to encounter them, as usually as soon as they arrive, they board the liveaboard, leave for the week, come back, and then straight back to the airport. And so in this way, it would be able to capture all the different tourists. They in fact conducted the surveys Monday through Saturday at different hours, in different locations, even in VIP lounges and all of that, to try and capture all the tourists.
All right, great. Just to kind of rebound on that, you mentioned in your discussion that the timing is very important of when you ask for a donation. And I'm just wondering, with the time passed between seeing the sharks and being at the airport, do you think this could have played on the answers at all? Or
So from what I found, no. All the studies that I have found indicate that visitors should be asked before they leave a destination, but they don't indicate that they should be asked directly after. I think it's something that could be tried to see if it impacts, but previous studies really focus, especially international tourists, which people visiting Galapagos, the majority are international tourists. The important thing is asking them kind of before the trip is over, but it doesn't necessarily say that it should be directly after experiences.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's very clear. My next question was regarding one of your suggestions, which was that funds collected in the Galapagos for shark conservation could be used in Panama. I was wondering if you know anything about the relationship between these two countries, if there's any potential conflict in using funds from collected in one and the other.
Yeah, okay. So for the first part of the question, the relationship between the two countries, as I mentioned, the scalloped hammerheads have just been upgraded to CMS Appendix 1. And actually recently, I think only a couple of weeks ago, the Charles Darwin Foundation, which is where I was doing my internship, they signed an agreement with Panama to commit to continuing or investigating even more possible joint conservation efforts for scalloped hammerheads. So there is something underway, hopefully. And I think that what's interesting, especially about these visitor collected funds, is that they're not collected by the government. So for example, the mandatory entry fee to Galapagos is collected by the government, and they of course decide how to use those funds, whereas these wouldn't need to necessarily stay in Galapagos. And if we protect scalloped hammerheads kind of where they're born, we're protecting the future populations of Galapagos. So that will directly influence Galapagos in the end. So I think it would benefit them.
Okay, great answer. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Florence. So yes, we can go with Emna and then Aziz.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, like, wow, you could synthesize your data into all this very well connected results. And also I'm impressed by your discussion at the end with the reflection later on, how it can go, etc. I am a little bit surprised by the fact that casual shark visitors are more willing to donate than dedicated shark visitors. You explained it a little bit by the fact that having the social medias that amplifies the expectations, etc. But do you see any other effects that can explain that, or variables that can explain that?
So I think personally, when we first analyzed the results, we were also very surprised going into. We kind of expected the opposite. You know, you think greater familiarity with the species, greater care for a species would lead you to want to protect them more and donate more. But really the only result that we found that would have guided this direction is this kind of, I don't want to say disappointment, because I want to highlight the fact that dedicated shark visitors were very satisfied. It's just that their expectations were so high, and therefore satisfaction itself doesn't impact willingness to donate. But it's this gap between their expectation, the satisfaction. I wouldn't necessarily be able to think of a different reason.
But is dedicated like they go a lot? Sorry.
No, it's just that they go there specifically for sharks. They visit Galapagos specifically for sharks, and if there were no sharks to be sighted in Galapagos or no shark Casual is they mentioned sharks as part of the reasons that they wanted to visit, but it wasn't the main reason. Yeah. And it's specifically the question that divided them in the survey was, would you visit Galapagos if there were no shark tourism experiences? And casual said they would come anyway, whereas dedicated said no.
Okay.
But yeah, so I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know. We couldn't really find any
Okay.
other reason. We're also very surprised.
Okay, but maybe another question is, do tourism industry dedicate already some percentages that goes to the management or to the conservation of the Galapagos already or not? Like the
So Galapagos in
curiosity
general,
question.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
Galapagos in general, yes. Of course, you
Okay.
have the entry fee.
Mhm.
So that's now $200 for international tourists and $60, I think, for people from Ecuador. So that is a lot of money that goes back into Galapagos, but that is spread across land conservation, different kinds of marine species. So it's very much spread. What they do spend money on specifically for sharks currently, I would say, is mostly surveying and patrolling the MPA. So they have people who are surveilling for illegal longlining, illegal artisanal longlining, which is an issue currently. So that's what most of the money goes towards, I think. But then, of course, that doesn't help the migratory species when they're outside the GMR.
Okay. Okay, and you probably mentioned it, but I can't remember if you did your surveys at the airport before visiting or after the shark.
Oh, it was after. It was after.
All the
when
time
they were
after.
leaving. Yeah, it
All
was
the
when they
time.
were leaving.
Was that a choice, like you wanted that, or was it based on the study before, or do you think there would be a difference if you asked them before having the experience?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the survey, I did not conduct or collect the survey results. This was in no, it's okay, in 2023.
You have a sense of how it was done also, because it's you that managed the data, no?
Yeah, of course. The data has been used to work on different papers, but I would, if I could have personally chosen, I would say I would have maybe liked to ask about expectations before.
Okay.
And satisfaction after. So I think that would be the one thing I would like to change.
Okay.
So it was still interesting that there were differences.
Of course.
But I think, yeah, that would be the most relevant thing for this study.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going back to you, Aziz, and we'll finish with Lisa.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I think this is kind of a part of conservation we don't really focus on, like actually how to get the money, because it's economic. I think it's a nice framework, clear, well defined, and I think your background also helped in this a lot. I could feel you selling me something.
Thank you.
Which is good. I think I agree with, I think it was Florence that said about where this money is going to, and with Panama, I think it's only right in the Galapagos, especially because it is such an international destination, that the money is used internationally as well. I think there's a precedent for that. I have a question about predictors. Would how much people paid be a good predictor of would they donate? So if you knew how much they paid in total.
So we actually had that information. We had the information on spending during the survey. So people were asked about how much they spent during their visit, how much they spent for activities and that. And we looked at if it was a predictor for satisfaction, and it wasn't. We didn't look. We looked at if it was a predictor for satisfaction and for return likelihood.
Okay.
But we didn't look, no, not directly,
because that's probably the one that if they got it for cheap, I don't know, actually.
But
maybe
I think then that's a little bit answered by people were asked, like, why were you not willing to donate? And I mean, they did say, yeah, they already said, yeah, we spent so much. So it was, it was.
That's cool. Yeah, mine was similar to Emna about the timing of this, obviously asking after the experience is...
Yeah.
If you ask, it'd be interesting to see asking before.
I think for sure it would be.
You have the excitement of going there. So.
Yeah, and personally, I analyzed my results before I got to Galapagos, and I was very surprised. And then once I got there and I went diving, and I was like, oh, I kind of get it actually.
Yeah.
So, because there is really, it's not just the expectations yourself when you go to Galapagos and you think, oh wow, Galapagos, but it's really on the dive boat. You have the guides who are saying, oh, what do you want to see? 1 hammerhead? Why not 100? Let's see 100. Let's see manta rays. And then you're thinking like,
maybe that's when they should.
So I think that's really when it like really pays.
How many do you want? And just one final kind of question that I'd like to know is, I do find it strange how we kind of pick and choose which areas of the world we want to protect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we don't pay to go into the Alps, or we don't pay to, not yet, but we, you know, you know, it's so we're so willing to pay so much for to go to this what we see as unique area. What does the data tell you about the demographics of people going there and their income?
So, so actually, most visitors were from Europe across the different profiles, which we thought was surprising, and then also a bit from America. It was quite spread out overall, even age group, income category. Yeah,
Do you have information about yeah, so you have income here, so
yeah, age. So they were asked, I mean, there's more detailed information on actual spending, but that was used for a different paper, so I had the more general information.
Yeah.
And interestingly, actually, dedicated shark visitors, they specifically were mostly from the higher income category. And we found that although they're less likely to donate, when they do donate, they donate more. And so I think it would be interesting to differentiate whether they're donating more because they're dedicated visitors or they're donating more because they're from a higher income category.
Okay. But here is the percentages are higher for low income people.
No.
No.
There.
For
For
dedicated.
dedicated. Yeah,
I
for
mean
dedicated.
Just overall.
Oh,
though.
overall, yes.
Yeah, overall,
sorry,
which
yeah.
is quite surprising.
Yeah.
So what would that mean?
But I was surprised because
we can charge more. I mean.
Well, they raised the visitor fee in 2024 after conducting willingness to pay surveys, and
is it because so they're dedicated and they have more income, they come back more regularly, so they have to pay this entry fee more regularly, and they may be less willing to pay even more?
So we did ask about if it was their first time visiting and if they would come back, and the majority of people, it was their first time visiting.
Okay.
On a 1 to 5 scale, the median was 3. So most people said that they were likely to return. But actually, when you look into like return percentages and all that in Galapagos, like the majority of people, 93% of tourists are first-time visitors. So although they say they're likely to return, this probably translates more into being likely to recommend it to people to come, but not necessarily return.
Kind of sold as a once in a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what kind of does all the marketing around it.
Thank you, Aziz. Luisa.
Yeah, I was also interested in this aspect, most of the questions, because I found also very interesting the comparison with Malaysia.
Yeah,
that you showed. It was a slide where you said effectively that one of the possible differences is that going to Malaysia is less luxury than going to Galapagos. But I would have expected you say
I wouldn't necessarily say it's less expensive. Yeah, less expensive.
I would have expected the opposite. You know, when you pay more, you can pay more. Eventually, you're also eager to invest more in the protection. But I mean, it's insane. Do you think that there could be also other factors? Because here, for example, you present 2 very different species.
No, so this was just images,
So
but
the species protected are the same, or do you think that the species that are more, because for example, in you have been talking about hammerheads, so probably also the communication that is done in Galapagos is more about hammerheads, and eventually the whale shark in Malaysia. So do you think, because I think you also worked a little bit with different species, so do you think that the species effect could also be important or more important than other factors?
I think for sure. I mean, I don't want to like go into insult different species, but I think
you can say that.
No, but you know, I think if people tell you like, oh yeah, come to this one place, there's 20 nurse sharks, it's interesting. But the scalloped hammerhead really has this allure and this attraction to it. And that's kind of why it works even more in tourism. I mean, of course, in Galapagos, there's other species that you can see. It's not just the hammerheads. But for example, the black tips are residents, and you can go snorkeling and see baby black tips, whereas the hammerheads, it's very like specific sites at specific times. And so I think this fact that they're so hard to see kind of builds the hype up a bit. In that case, I think also in Malaysia, whale sharks, people travel there to see the whale sharks, but they're not maybe, they're not asked 200 years as soon as they come in. They're not asked all this. So then, and especially in my paper, I see that when they kind of see the environment of Malaysia and they think that their money could go towards helping, they're more prone to helping, whereas maybe that's not as much the case in Galapagos.
Yes, whale shark are the good ones.
Maybe good to do a comparison, actually.
Yeah,
like, because I know
I would
Malaysia,
love that.
You pay minimal.
Yeah. I would absolutely love to look at the different, but anyway,
future. Interesting to see this and compare with other areas, eventually in other species. And also, do you know if there are similar studies that have been performed in Galapagos, for example, on turtles or iguana?
Yes, actually.
And compare also the number of persons that are eager to pay, but also how much. Because, for example, how much in Malaysia they are proposing to pay, it was $20 or $29. That is not too bad in Galapagos. And sometimes you have $1, $2. So comparing different compartments and also the amount.
Of course. So the survey asked just if they were willing to pay, and then it was like 0, 5, 10. So people kind of filled out what they wanted. So even here, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they were just asked kind of like yes or no, whether they're willing to participate, and then the amount was separate. But sorry, the first part of your question.
If you know about similar studies in Galapagos.
Yes, in Galapagos.
Similar study in other places about the same species, but also in Galapagos, for example, on other emblematic species such as iguana.
So for Galapagos specifically, I did base a lot of my research onto a paper by Cardenas and Lu 2016, and they looked about willingness to donate specifically for sea turtles and scalloped hammerheads. So, but they didn't then look into quantifying that. So my study was then taking that further. So we know that people are somewhat willing to donate. And the idea was, okay, how much can we do anything with that funding? And if satisfaction plays a role. So there are studies. And then also they've looked at willingness to pay for seamounts in Galapagos. So there's broader information, but nothing that quantifies the amount.
Not even the percentage.
There is the percentage of how many people are willing. Yes.
And it was more or less the same? Or
it was more or less, but then it's because mine was so divided among people. But
So you're talking about seamounts, but you're not talking about iguanas or turtles?
No, one asked turtles and sharks, and then another one was seamounts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone
Okay.
Just two small questions. The first one, like for example, the entrance fee is dedicated only for people that don't come from Ecuador, or it's also for the locals?
So it's also for the locals, and it increased for everyone. So actually, for Ecuadorians, it doubled, but from I think it was. I don't know if I think it was from 15 to 30. It went from 30 to 60. So even though it is less, it is complete double. And then of course, even for the international, it went from 100 to 200. There is also a discount for people from Mercosur, so from like some Latin American countries, but it is for everyone. The only people who don't pay are residents, of course, when they're coming back home.
And the other question is, maybe you don't know that because you didn't do the survey, but like when they were asked how much they will pay to conserve the sharks, they asked if this amount was plus the entry fee, or if this amount was going to be included in the entry fee.
No. So it was it was additional, because then of course the entry fee would be more willingness to pay, as that's like a mandatory fee, whereas this would be an additional donation specifically for shark conservation, like separate.
And this was mentioned well.
Yeah. It was on the people filled out the surveys themselves. They were asked questions and they filled out the surveys themselves, and it was on the.
On that, do you know if it's like it's a once a year? So if someone comes back more than once a year. Do they have to pay again?
Yes.
Okay.
Not Disneyland.
No,
Annual pass.
You may have this annual pass.
Yeah. I mean, that I would have thought that as well.
It's only for residents that don't pay, and then if you're going there, for example, I didn't pay because I was going there through a visa. Yeah. Yes, Andy.
Yes, I have an interesting question for you because I was in the training course for the guides, the marine guides.
Yeah,
in the
okay.
Galapagos. And like your comment was like curious to me when that you mentioned that when you were going to these dives, they were like, oh, you want to see one shark, we're gonna give you 100 and everything, because actually during the training course, you tell them like you kind of see those things because it's nature. You don't know how many sharks, how many animals you will encounter. So my question goes for like, did you measure like, or well, it will be interesting to measure how much did the guide influence in their experience or expectation for their trip?
Yeah, I mean, from research I've seen that tourism marketing often promotes guaranteed sightings rather than ecological reality, and I think that's common. I understand that even if they're told not to do it, it's kind of a selling point. I mean, you walk into a dive shop in Santa Cruz, which is like one of the main island, and there's photos of Darwin and Wolf aggregations, which you're not, you know.
Photos on your slide.
Yes, exactly.
But in this way, well, you're in the boat, you know, like in this when you're like traveling to the spot, like you have the guy like hyping you up.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think it would be hard to measure that because you'd really have to be like, so what did you think of what he just said? Well, people are like getting, but it would be very interesting.
You mentioned that when you arrived there, you were hyped, but
I wasn't.
during the
Yeah.
experience, you were hyped even more. So,
Yeah.
I think maybe a good point actually to if you had a bad flight,
Yeah.
if you had a bad meal at a restaurant, so that could all influence it as well.
For sure, and
Not just the chef.
and usually if we're looking at like, I don't know, for example, more restaurants, if people have a negative experience, they're more likely to put a negative review
exactly.
than positive. So I think it would be super interesting, but that's
And Ocean, what about your experience?
so
Because
yeah.
I think I remember someone telling me, "Oh my God."
No. Well, so like I said, so I did my first 2 dives were not great. The Galapagos are obviously volcanic islands, and I live on volcanic islands. But the Canarian waters are nutrient poor, and so we don't have sharks. Well, we do have some, but you don't really see them while diving. And so while I was diving the first time in Galapagos, I basically saw nothing, bad visibility, rocks, and I was like, I've just paid $100 to dive back home. So that wasn't great. And then my second dive of the day, also the current was really intense. It was going up and down constantly, and we saw like 3 hammerheads passing by in the background, and I was like, but then I did other dives that were amazing. We saw mantas, we saw iguanas, we saw sea lions. It was great. And then we were chasing this wall of hammerheads, and we went to the 2 most likely places to see it, because of course the most likely is Darwin and Wolf, but that's only liveaboard. So if you're going from just day dive trips, that's Gordon Rocks and Kicker Rocks, that's on San Cristobal, so another island. I did Kicker Rocks first, saw nothing. Gordon Rocks, saw nothing, did Kicker Rocks, saw nothing, and then finally at the last moment of the second dive.
It's going to be a question because there was one, like how many dives did you do, like roughly, and compared 12. And do you have an idea how many dives common visitors? Like, is it roughly the same, or can it be much lower? So less chance to see something.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to look at, actually, to see, because of course you can do 1 dive and be extremely lucky, and you could do 20 and see nothing. But what was interesting actually is we couldn't test it too much statistically because for dedicated visitors, we had mostly people from liveaboards compared to people from day trips, but it was the people on the liveaboards who were not satisfied specifically.
Very hard to please
on liveaboards.
Because
so it was the people who've done more dives.
Increased,
even
more expectations.
Yeah, more expectations, but they would have more dives because people
so
that
more
we've done.
chances to see something.
Yeah.
And how much did you donate? At the end of it.
We will stop the presentation here. So, thank you. I will take the microphone and say thank you, Sam. Congratulations. And something tells me that the discussion will continue during the break that we will take now. We're coming back in this room in 20 minutes, so at 45 in this room. And the next speaker, Amy, will start at 3:50. Amy and Gabriela. You know. I have it. Thank you. So before I start again, I would like to introduce you to a new member of the jury for the second part, as I mentioned before. So Guillaume Leport from Blue Seats will join us as well. So we continue this afternoon talking about socio-ecological systems with Amy in French Polynesia and with Gabriela Delmar in Mayotte. Amy, when you're ready, and I think you are, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. So this is Bora Bora. And though every island in the Pacific is unique, many of them look a lot like this, with a volcanic island surrounded by a coral reef that protects coastlines and stops waves. But if you look a little bit closer, most of these reefs are actually not impassable barriers. They contain openings that allow water, people, and animals to pass through. So this is what my study is focused on, these areas called reef passages, and the social ecological importance of these passages in an island in French Polynesia called Rangiroa, and negotiating the values and uses of these cultural and ecological keystone places. My name is Amy Green, and I did my master's thesis at CRIOB in French Polynesia, supervised by Jean Wanselius, Elodie Fache, and Annette Breckwold. So you may have heard about a keystone species that holds together an ecosystem, but there's also in literature talk about keystone places that are locations that are very important for communities, for identity and well-being. And in the region of Oceania, which has sometimes been referred to as a sea of islands, all connected by the Pacific Ocean, it makes sense that these areas, these keystone areas, would be connected to the sea. And so my study location was in what's now known as French Polynesia, which is overseas territory of France, partly the jurisdiction with a local government in Tahiti, the capital, and the government in France. And here, and specifically on the Tuamotu archipelago, which is a series of 77 atolls. And an atoll is a volcanic island where the volcano has completely sunken beneath the sea, and all that's left is a ring of coral island where the reef used to be. And so here, the ocean is truly everywhere. In most of the places on the island, you can see both the open ocean and the lagoon at the same time. So here, reef passes are actually areas of particular importance, areas that open the open ocean to the lagoon, and they really separate the land where people live. And so my study was focused on the atoll of Rangiroa, or Ra'iroa in Reo Tahiti, which is the largest atoll in the Tuamotu archipelago. And here there are two deep reef passes, Avatoru and Tiputa. And here, most of the population lives right next to these two passes. And here, like most of the Tuamotus, fishing has always been a way of life in these islands. However, the main economic activity of Rangiroa has changed over the years from copra culture in the mid-1900s, so harvesting coconuts for oil, to harvesting pearls and pearl culture, to a large fishing export of the o'eo, or the long-nosed emperor, in the 90s and 2000s, to now tourism, which really runs the atoll, the main economic activity, as Tiputa Pass is actually a world-renowned scuba diving site right now. And so this island was chosen for this study, actually based on this high tourism activity, but also a thriving fishing population, particularly in the passes, and also the heavy cruise and cargo ship traffic that happens within the passes. And the activity on the atoll, specifically in these areas, has led to conflict between mostly fishers and tourism operators. And so there's been a local management committee created, and this was part of this study. And so my main research questions were, could the two deep reef passes of Rangiroa be considered ecological and cultural keystone places? And what are the values attached to these landmarks? Or more simply, are they important and how are they used? And so this contributed to parts 1 and 2 of my master's thesis, focused on actually contributing to a larger study in the Pacific studying passes and their importance. My second research question was, in a context of rapid social ecological changes and multiplication of diverse uses, how do stakeholder perspectives impact envisioning a future management of the passes? Or more simply, how have they changed and how can they be managed? And so this was actually linked with this local management plan and parts 3 and 4 of my master's thesis. So in order to do this, I spent 2 months in Rangiroa, the atoll, staying in the smaller fishing village of Tiputa on the east side of Tiputa Pass. And I conducted semi-structured interviews, which consisted also of a mapping component to understand where people go in the pass. I also conducted participant observation. So I was able to go on fishing trips, on excursions with tourists and scuba diving in the pass to understand how these different activities operate. And I won't have time to talk about it today, but I also got to work with 3 schools on the atoll to understand the youth perspectives of why the pass is important and how they view it. And so in all, I had 74 conversations with people, including 50 that were more long and formal, containing this mapping component. And out of these people, 76% of them fish in some capacity. So fishing is clearly very important to the population, no matter what they work in. I talked to 56 men and 18 women. And in terms of people's main economic activity, 39% of people work in fishing, either currently or retired. 35% work in tourism, so working in excursions, in diving, or in tourist accommodation. And then 26% work in other fields, so the government, or in handicrafts, or in schools. And out of each group, at least 50% of the people I talked to are from Rangiroa. But it's also important to note that all the dive monitors and dive club owners, none of them come from Rangiroa, and that's going to be important later. And so before I get into results, I also just want to talk about how these methods may have led to limitations. So of course, with all social science research, I have a personal bias, which I tried to take into account in my analysis. So being a woman, being from the United States, and also having lived with Fisher and his family when I was there. There's also, it was the low season for tourism and fishing when I was there, which may have impacted how people talk about fish populations. And there's also a risk of encliquage, which is an anthropological term, an anthropological term for the fact that when you meet a new community through a certain network, it may exclude you from other networks. So I tried to also mitigate this by going outside of my network when I was meeting people on the island. And so in all my conversations, I was able to determine that the passes of Rangiroa are high locations of cultural and ecological significance that contribute to the cultural identity and well-being of the people on this island, which is similar to what's been found in Fiji, in New Caledonia, in Vanuatu, and other Pacific island nations. People say things like, the pass is the door of a house. Without it, you can't go inside. Simply, someone said, the pass, it's life. Someone referred to it as their second husband, so kind of personifying this area. A lot of people referred to it as the lungs of the atoll, so allowing water exchange. And people talked a lot about how it allows fish and humans to pass through and its importance for the fish population of the atoll. But it's also important because it's used. And so this is actually, if we look a little bit more at Tiputa Pass and the activities happening, we see that there's a lot of overlap. And so in this pass that's about a half a kilometer wide, we can see there's a lot of activities. In red, you can see all of the fishing activities. In green, you can see the dive boats and divers underwater. You can see the line that shows the cruise, cargo, and sailboats that are constantly coming through the pass. You can see the yellow excursions constantly coming in and out of the pass to look for the dolphin population that lives there. So we see a lot of overlap in this space. We see a lot of human activity. But the conflict on the atoll is more linked to divers and fishers. So I've actually made this map just looking at these two activities. And what we see here is that most of the overlap occurs between spearfishers and line fishers and diving activities. So divers underwater, which you can see in green, dive boats in blue, or the spots where they exit, the little dots. And so this might indicate that the main conflict in the pass has to do with people trying to use the same spaces and overlap. But at the same time, this is still just a snapshot of what's happening in the past today. People also talked in the interviews a lot about the changes that have happened over time, specifically 3 different changes. So the first one was an increase in human activity over the past 50 to 60 years. So boat activity in the past, talking about noise and how this has increased, and also tourism in general on the atoll. People say things like, we've been at maximum capacity in the past since COVID, or it's certain, it's an over-exploitation of the pass. And people talk a lot as well about the increase in divers in the past. So one fisher said there's too many divers, too many clubs, which people saying also that there can be up to 100 or 110 divers in the past at one time, which is a lot for this very small space. The second change that people talk about is a lifestyle change. And it's important to note here that Rangiroa in this short amount of time has gone from being a relatively remote atoll, mainly based on resource harvesting of fish and of copra, of coconuts, to now a tourism location subject to global market forces. And so people say things like these mindsets have shifted. Everything is about money and business today. The ancestors didn't think about this. They're trying to become rich. People want to become rich. And also that that life on the atoll has been uncontrollably expensive, and you have to enter into tourism in order to survive. And a lot of this talks about also mindsets coming from an external place coming to Rangiroa. And then the third change that people talk about is a large animal change. So particularly a decline in commercially important fish species. And so when I asked people why they think that these fish species have declined, people gave 4 answers typically. So overfishing, especially with the OAO fishing in the past. Climate change. People talk about saturation, so too many humans in the past making noise. But interestingly, people also say that diving is a cause of fish population decline in the past. And so if we look a little bit more closely at who is saying that these fish are declining due to diving, we have 3 groups here. So we have people from Rangiroa, people from French Polynesia besides Rangiroa, and people coming from elsewhere. And further dividing these groups, we have their main economic activity on the left of each group. So diving, whether they work in excursions, fishing, other, or tourist accommodation. And then it's going to link with what they say that the main cause of fish decline in the past is. So if we take a look at who's saying that diving is causing fish decline, you can see that it's much larger in the people coming from French Polynesia and Rangiroa, particularly fishers who say this. But if we look at people coming from elsewhere, especially people working in diving, we see that no people from elsewhere working in diving say that diving is a cause of fish decline. But if we look at people saying that overfishing is a cause of fish decline, we see that pretty equally in all 3 groups people talk about this, including fishers. So we see that fishers are more likely to recognize their impact on this fish decline than maybe divers are. And so when divers hear this, typically some of them will say, okay, let's measure the impact of diving on fish decline, because many management decisions have to do with scientific data. But what my study found is that maybe this isn't the heart of the issue on Rangiroa, because if you remember, 100% of dive monitors and dive club owners have spent less than 1/3 of their life on Rangiroa. And so what the underlying meaning of this was to me through my interviews was that really there was a deeper root to this conflict that was more connected with a sense of displacement in the past, specifically Tiputa Pass. And this could have been a spatial displacement, so people diving in a space that was used before often for transit or for fishing. It could be an economic displacement, so a small number of people, mostly foreigners, earning a lot of money, so around 80 to 100 euros per person per dive, and not always shared equally between the local population and the people diving. It could be a political displacement, so people talked about not feeling in control of the decisions made about management in the past, or also a cultural displacement with these mindsets and changes about money coming in from outside. And so what I found was that maybe the deeper root of this conflict is actually more about retaining local control over Tiputa Pass. But in general, in all of my conversations, what I found is that really the passes are the places to start in terms of management. And my conversations also led to the fact that these are cultural and ecological keystone places. And that's clear because by studying them, we actually have a window into the social relationships and the conflicts on the atoll. By studying these locations, we're not just seeing what's happening in the past. It actually shows the concerns that are broader than just the past that are happening in the social relationships on the atoll. And so as tourism and globalization continue to reshape how Pacific Islanders are living, it's really important and even more significant to consider these questions of local control, of cultural continuity that people are concerned about in the future. And this is just a case study. Rangiroa is one atoll in the Tuamotus, but it also resonates with other Pacific Island nations. So people talking about in countries with a lasting colonial system like French Polynesia, these interpretations of outside people coming in can be perceived as lasting colonial interests trying to make decisions in a place. And also questions of indigenous rights and local governance and social justice in these locations. And so in conclusion, what my study shows, or what it can show here, is that it's important in terms of management to consider the complex social dynamics of a place. For instance, in order to manage the past, you need to also acknowledge these feelings of displacement and frustrations with these changing lifestyles. And also that in making space for management decisions, you also need to consider not only what activities are taking place, but the core values that people hope that these management decisions will bring forward into future generations. And lastly, that keystone places are essential to identify in order to understand the dynamics of a place, but also to begin management here in order to make the most effective management decisions possible. And so with that, I just want to say a big maururu, or thank you, to everyone involved in the study and all of you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Amy, for so this round of questions. We're going to start with Aziz, moving on with Florence after.
Thank you very much. It was really, really nice. I've actually never heard of keystone places, so that was really kind of interesting to hear. Obviously, we hear keystone species, so I'm a bit more interested in kind of this aspect. Did you look at kind of other keystone places around the world, or what you would identify as a keystone place, and what's the kind of criteria? And I would like to know if these are like mostly managed places, because I'm guessing the pass here is considered managed to some extent.
It's actually, I would say, not managed at this point. They created a local management committee to try to establish management. But yeah, so the idea of a keystone place, it comes from keystone species and there's actually the idea of a cultural keystone species that's important to the identity of a population. And then that was also kind of extrapolated into a keystone place, that it's a location important for cultural identity. And that I really only know about the other cultural keystone places in the Pacific, but passes have been identified in other places as these locations. But it can also be kind of central locations where people gather in an island, such as a sacred site.
So it's very much a kind of human environment interaction. It's not this place is important for the ecology of the place. It's directly kind of related to.
I wonder if I can go back fast enough, but actually, so the main idea that's been cited in literature is the idea of a cultural keystone place, but an ecological keystone place is actually an idea that's been proposed often through passes, because they're not only just important for cultural reasons, but because passes create an upwelling zone where there's a lot of nutrients, which creates a high ecological activity and larger animals that come to eat. And so these places that are not only important for cultural reasons, but for ecological reasons. So it's actually a really new idea that's coming into place right now.
Nice alluvial plots. Love them.
Thank you.
Yeah, made a lot of sense. I'm just interested in like kind of the terminology in this, because one of your results was, divers don't see themselves as causing overfishing or damage. Sorry, which one was it?
Yeah, as causing a decline in animal and fish, commercial fish.
Yeah. So, but if you were to ask a diver, and I'm guessing I'm just assuming the vast majority of divers are tourists. If you ask them, does tourism lead to this? Do you think the result would be different?
I think that's a good question, but I think I actually didn't ask anyone who's coming to visit. I didn't ask these are all dive monitors or dive club owners. These are not actually tourists.
Okay.
So these are people who live on Rangiroa. And the thing that's interesting here is that actually, so we have dive monitors and dive club owners coming from elsewhere. And then we also have people working in diving from Rangiroa, which are typically the captains of the dive boats. And none of them are dive monitors or dive club owners, but also some of them said that diving is the cause. So we see that people from Rangiroa who work in diving do say that diving could be the cause, but people coming from elsewhere don't say that diving.
So there is a recognition there,
that it could be. And then one other interesting thing is that there was nobody from Rangiroa who said that there's been no change in animals in the past, where we do see that there's a group from each of these that says that there's been no change. So when you ask about tourists, it made me think of that maybe someone who hasn't been there as long wouldn't recognize that there's been this big decline in animals as well. Yeah.
Cool. And maybe finally, and this is, I'm happy you mentioned about like colonialism and things and people belonging, because it is important and is a sensitive kind of subject. But let's imagine that French Polynesia voted to be independent and that all these people went back or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think those jobs that were there would then be taken over by local people, so the number of foreigners owning diving clubs would decline? Would it change much? Would the damage still be occurring, or do you think there are definitely other ways of doing things for sure? But in your opinion, what do you think?
I think that I don't know that there's many local people who have the interest or skills to be dive monitors or club owners. Maybe they would in the future, but I think that right now diving brings so much tourism to the atoll. I can't see that they would want that to stop. And I think there are dive monitors and club owners that are established, that have lived there for years, that are not, people don't want them to leave now, but it's just this idea that their use of the pass is disproportionately bigger or less considerate of what was happening before.
And the distribution of the wealth is not.
So maybe it's more about managing what's happening now than trying to stop it in the future, I think.
Maybe also setting criteria of who you hire as well. And
yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Aziz. We can go for Florence and then Luisa.
Yes, thanks, Amy. Congrats on the fantastic work. I'm curious whether this great work you've done, is it the first, or had the local government tried to do anything, or maybe French Polynesian institutions tried to get any kind of results on the public perceptions?
That's a good question. So as I mentioned, my study was linked with a local management plan. So it's called the Projet Mihiroa. And so they are working in French Polynesia to get more ideas of what locals are thinking. But this is a study that was particularly of interest already to the local management plan, but they hadn't had anyone yet to conduct it. So this was just kind of a nice coincidence of a combination of a study of the passes in the Pacific with the idea that in order to make this management plan, the committee wanted to have the opinion of the local population. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious if any of their unpublished results, maybe if you had the chance to consult them and compare them to your results?
As there's not been anything, there's been some studies in Rangiroa about the fish populations, the decline, and also about how fishing could be managed, which are published through the Protège project. But there's never been a study on the social implications in Rangiroa. There have been on management decisions made in other islands like Moorea, which is right next to Tahiti, and also on Tahiti. And there has been similar results found about how people perceive outside interests as, or not outside interests, but decisions being made as coming from either a bigger government in Tahiti or coming from France. And people not always feeling clear on what the management decisions are, or choosing not to follow them because they don't feel like they were listened to in the decision-making process. So there hasn't been, this is kind of the first yet on Rangiroa, but it's found similar results than what's been found in French Polynesia.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying. My next question is regarding the perception of the locals and how openly vocal they are about their dissatisfaction in the way the pass is evolving. You mentioned some of the things they said regarding too much passage or tourism. Has there been any direct conflict between the stakeholders, or is it more via personal communication like these semi-structured interviews?
That's a good question. I think it was more in the conversations I had with people that they shared this dissatisfaction, but people are also quite open about it. Like when you talk to a fisher maybe that is anti-divers, they will start talking about that right away. It's not hidden, but I don't think there's been many conflicts on the water, except, so if you notice, I only talked about Tiputa Pass really, because there's no diving activity in Avatoru Pass, even though there are, it's a beautiful pass and there's a lot of fishing activity, but there has been some incidents with a couple of fishers over there that say that you're not allowed to dive in a pass, and some some divers who had told me that there were fishers that were kind of circling them, and they didn't want to have any accidents with a boat, so they ended up stopping diving in Avaturu Pass. So there have been some small incidents, but mostly I would say it's verbal and a dissatisfaction with how things are going on right now.
Okay, great, thanks. And if there's time at the end, I'd be curious to hear about the youth perspectives. Thanks, Amy.
We can go to you, Louisa, and coming back to Emma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. So if I understand well, you focused on the animal changes about fish communities and diving.
Yes.
Those were the two more interesting things, in my opinion. So did you find any evidence of, also in other parts of the world, of course, about effects of diving on fishing communities? And eventually, so what is your opinion? Is effectively diving affecting the composition, the structure of fish communities or the abundances? And if you have some more considerations about this?
Whether diving is physically affecting fish populations?
Directly or indirectly?
Okay, yeah. No, it's a good question. And I think right now the studies are kind of, they don't agree on whether diving is causing fish change. Anecdotally, I heard from people that there was, that diving maybe attracts fish because of the bubbles. Fish are curious, they come over. And even a couple spearfishers said that there was a lot of talk about how fish have become deeper in the past, and so it's more difficult to spearfish. You have to be more skilled, and that could be because there's less fish. But some people think maybe it's because these fish are going deeper, they're staying with the divers, and so you have to go deeper to fish. But I think that it could be that it's also just a lot of human activity where there was less before. With divers comes boats making a lot of noise, and I think that's been shown also to affect fish populations. But I don't have any statistics on other locations, but it's not certain whether it's a positive or negative impact on fish populations.
Yeah, I had two other, but maybe only one. I don't know if we are running out of time.
Okay, so we can go to you, Emma, and we'll finish with you.
Oh, okay.
Ah, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We can see at the end. I had two more questions, but I don't know about the time.
Okay, let's go, Emma.
Okay, I will be quick also. Thank you, Amy, for your presentation, and thank you for your manuscript also. Very interesting and hard subject, I want to say, because it's never easy to show perception of stakeholders in a quantitative way. So, I mean, for me, it was the major difficulty that you had. I was a little bit surprised that everywhere we are hearing about marine protected areas, new marine protected areas in French Polynesia, like everyone is talking about it, and you didn't mention it at all. So I was wondering if your study area was a part of something declared this year, last year. It's moving a lot in terms of declaration in there. So how is it for you?
So
just go to the next slide and come back.
Yep. Okay. So from what I understand, unless things have changed, that French Polynesia has now been declared a marine protected area completely. So there's no industrial fishing that's allowed. However, in Rangiroa, there is a ZPR, so a zone de pêche réglementée, which, but however, if you can see, it's really in this southern corner, and the two passes are up here where all of this green activity is. I'm not sure if you can see with the screen, but so it doesn't really affect what's happening in the pass. And people talk about that on the atoll. They know about it, but it doesn't really affect how people fish. They're just basically, you're not allowed to fish there and bring it back to sell it. But I think there's talk about also a PGEM, which is a pêche, gestion de environnement.
Plan de gestion de l'espace maritime.
Thank you, Yem. Which is one of the ideas of what could be created on the atoll but some people are not in favor of it because it does still feel like a top-down management decision. I think here, because there's already been a committee created, which involves different actors, so someone representing diving, someone representing tourism, someone representing fishing in Tiputa and in Navatoru, so different community members already. I think there's already this push to have a local management committee. So I think maybe the fact of an MPA feels still too top down and people aren't really talking about it. People talk about Arahui, which is a more locally, it's a traditional management system from a lot of areas of the Pacific, but it happened in French Polynesia as well, which is a temporal ban on fishing that traditionally would happen since the beginning of these communities, as far as I understand, that that would protect kind of the population of fish over time. So this is a term that imposes some of the same regulations as an MPA, but it's always temporal. So it will open up with fishing seasons or close, or the one that they're talking about in Rangiroa is actually about closing around the pass at a certain time period around the full moon, because the full moon is when many fish are coming through the pass. And so people are interested in, especially fishers, stopping diving and tourism and also fishing activity during this time, but then it would reopen for the rest of the month. So it's really, people are interested in a more locally created management system.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and thank you for pointing that out in your presentation and also in your document. That brings me to my next question. Now that you showed that these passes, the pass is very, very important to the people, to the local people living there. What would be the next steps, if any? Like, what would be the implications of your work for them and for the, I don't know, governance system or another management plan? I don't know, like.
Yeah, so because they actually haven't created a management plan yet. So the idea is to take this data and hopefully use it to have an idea of what the population thinks before creating a management plan. So part of my study was also understanding what different management ideas people have, so Rahui, different fishing closures, and so this will be submitted to the community, so they can use this to hopefully inform decisions, and also to understand the changes that have happened over time. So focusing on maybe which fish have declined over time and whether specific management decisions need to be made regarding those species.
Okay, but I imagine there are also other studies that are ongoing on because these are the perceptions, but there is also another part, maybe more quantitative studies about the fishing change.
Yes, so there has been a study on this, on the O'eo, which is this one species that was heavily fished, and they're hoping to do more studies on the fish populations and especially on acoustics. So they actually have already acoustic sensors placed to understand the noise of boats that are passing in and out of the pass. And then they're also hoping to do an economic study, so understanding how tourism and fishing contribute to the economics of the island and how that will impact future management as well.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, now, Socio.
Hi, everybody. Hello, Amy. Nice to see you. First of all, a little disclaimer, because I used to be colleague with Amy at Blue Seed, so if you think I'm too nice to her, it's because I have a conflict of interest. Sorry. So yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. My first question is about the different interviews you did with the people from local communities. So you mentioned different bias that you can have when you are doing such sociological survey, let's say. So now that you have left and you have analyzed your results, are there some things that you would change if you had to do another type of study like that?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think with the 2 months that I had, it was a good representation of the different groups of people in the atoll that are in the pass, that are actively using the pass. I think it's always interesting to get other people's views, so it would be interesting to see people that are less connected to the pass, especially in terms of how they feel it's important, whether people working in fields that are not at all connected to the past, which the other category was, but often they had some kind of link with the past. They previously worked on excursion boats or were fishers. So it would be interesting to see other people's perspectives. But I also think it could have been also interesting to have no, I think it was really, I was able to see the different groups of people well, and it was really also thanks to the local committee members that helped me meet the right people on the atoll and took me to meet everybody in order to understand who is using this pass every day.
Okay, thanks. And can you tell us more about your methodology of interviews? I guess people from CRIOB were already working there for many years. So when you arrived concretely, how did things happen? Did you have to drink a lot of alcohol with them to become friends? Or what happened?
Honestly, no, I was lucky enough to be living with a fisher. And so he knew a lot of contacts on the smaller village where I was living, which I think I have a map here I can show. So these are some of the questions that I asked to people. But it was, as I said, it was thanks to someone who really took me to different people to meet them. I didn't have to drink a lot with people. People were very open, and it's a really calm way of life there. But I did go there completely alone. There wasn't someone from CRIOB with me, and to be honest, I think that was for the best, because there is some conflict with CRIOB and with the local community that feels that there's been some studies that have maybe not taken place the way they wanted to. So sometimes I think it was nice that I was alone, and also someone from the United States, which is a bias, but also it being a former French colony, it also actually it was useful for me to not be French. Being on this atoll, people were more open to speaking with me, actually.
Great, thanks. And maybe one last quick question. It's also about the next step, as it was mentioned before. So you mentioned the Rawi, which is working in some places in Tahiti and also in some other islands. You mentioned the PGEM, that is not very well working in Moorea, in my opinion. But in your opinion, so of course the work that you've done will be, let's say, digested by local community, and we'll see what they do with it. But in your opinion, based on all the information that you gather and based on your understanding of the context, what would you advocate for if you were a decision maker in French Polynesia? What would be one of the best? It's a very open question. And
okay, and it's difficult because I'm not going to be the one making decisions. Hopefully,
of course,
should be coming from local voices. But if I think advocating for the people who have lived on Rangiroa for generations and making sure that their voices are heard in terms of what they want to see their children experiencing on the atoll, whether that's diving, whether that's excursions, that might be what it is, but that they should be the ones with the loudest voices.
Thank you, Amy.
We can come back to you, Louisa.
No, just very, very quick. I was very interested also Emna mentioned it about the questions, how you organized your conversations. And of course, I think that the conversation is easier where you don't put limits, but did you, for some question, for example, use this quantification of perception, like giving a score 0 to 10 or something like that, so it would have been possible to quantify and eventually compare with other studies? Or if it was not possible, you decided not to give more freedom to the other person, would you do the same the next time, or would you try to include some quantitative estimation in order to set the cursor somewhere?
I think because I took more of an anthropological approach to this, I think I would leave it very open-ended. And I think I felt like by asking very open-ended questions, it also allowed the person I was talking to share what they were interested in, to kind of go in the direction they wanted, and that also allowed them to bring up subjects without me prompting what I thought was important, for them to tell me what's important to them. And I think that ended up with a more robust idea of what people think, rather than, I think it might have been a little bit smaller if I hadn't, if I had asked specific questions. But maybe in terms of the future ideas about socioeconomics, it might be interesting to ask questions more targeted about money values, or I think in terms of importance, it was really an emotion that I heard from people, this connection to the past. Whereas I think if I asked how important do you think the past is, I wouldn't have gotten the same type of response, which, yeah, I think I would do it.
No, and maybe it would be also be useful, you know, first to ask the open question and let them, and then at the end, okay, after your answer, where would you put your feelings? No, you know, from no important to really, I mean, neutral, completely negative or completely positive.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a few minutes with your questions.
Astrid?
Just maybe I didn't see that correctly, but I think in the interviews there was a majority was men and less women. I wanted to know why and if that affected the results or something.
Yeah, it's definitely a bias in the results. And really why is because I was focused on activities in the past, and most fishing, professional fishing, is taking place by men, specifically spearfishers. I didn't talk to any women who were spearfishers. And also excursion captains and guides are all men, as far as I know on the atoll. And so these activities in the past are majority led by men, and so that's why my sample study, my sample structure showed that. But it would also be really interesting to get more women's perspectives and get a more gender balanced idea of the past. Yeah. Sophia, you had the same question. Okay.
Did you interview from all around the atoll, or did you mostly stay close to the past, or how did the location of the interviews work?
So I was living. So Hiria Pass is Tiputa Pass, the traditional name. I was living on the east side of that, and mainly people live very close to the pass or on that main island in between the two passes. And so it's about 45 minutes to an hour to bike across that main island. So it's not super big, but you have to take a water taxi to get there. So I did a large amount of my interviews in Tiputa because that's where a lot of the fishing activities are taking place. But it was kind of a mix all across the main island as well.
So in general, people mainly stay near the pass. They don't live like all on the atoll.
There are people, but it's much less inhabited, I would say. Yeah, over 95% of people live near the passes. Yeah.
Oh.
So it's clearly not just not managed yet, but also super understudied. And I think the only monitoring or ecological study you mentioned was acoustic research. From your perspective, what would be other studies, like from an ecological point of view, you know, that would help the management? Because I agree, and with the direction of making their voices be heard the loudest, but a scientific foundation surely wouldn't hurt.
And that's what the management committee thinks as well. And so there has been the study on the OAO, which is the fish that was overfished, is how people often talk about it in the past, because the population has declined. I think people are interested also in, with the noise, seeing how the populations are in the past right now. But I think also it's difficult because there's been this big decline. And so it's hard to measure a baseline of what was there before if we're talking about fish or dolphin decline, which there's also been a researcher studying dolphins in the past, and there's been a decline, which is a big draw for tourism. So honestly, what I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think that maybe it's less important to do many, many more ecological studies, because I think these perceptions of local stakeholders are the most important in terms of managing the conflicts on the atoll. That it's, yes, it could impact fish species, but what's happening is that a decline in fish means a decline in fishing, which means a decline in livelihoods. And maybe at least to see how diving could be managed in the past may reduce this conflict to begin with. And then if animal species are still in decline, then there's maybe some ecological actions to take place, to put into place.
Thank you and congratulations, Amy.
Thank you.
And yes, we are now having to you, Gabriela. I have to tell you that Gabriela is looking at me for 10 minutes. Like, I'm vexed.
Okay. You good?
So from French Polynesia, let's go to Mayotte. With you, Gabriela. Just before you start, I would like to thank also the supervisors of Amy at CRIOB, so Jean Vancelius, Elodie Fache, and Annette Breckwold, as you said at the beginning. And so for Gabriela Delmar, Castagno Pinilla, I would like also to thank your supervisors. Bonjour Adrien, so Adrien Comte, Stéphanie D'Agata, Mathieu Leduff, and Georgetta Stoica.
So if a disaster arrived and destroyed your town, and someone arrived with millions to rebuild, will you call it a success or a failure? Well, that's something that I went to Mayotte to investigate. This is an island that was hit by a cyclone in 2024, which actually destroyed the island. So let's talk about this. So we live on a planet that is constantly changing, and at the same time, we have long-term issues. But what is a long-term issue? It's basically complex problems that are persistent through time and that can impact exponent generations. So the combination of these two factors makes it difficult to planify for the future. But there's a solution, and it's basically long-term policies. These are strategies that what they do is that they prepare us for the future. They can adapt and they are flexible to different scenarios. So for instance, there's some climate events, some disasters that can act as a catalyst to draw the attention of policymakers to implement long-term policies. As I mentioned before, Mayotte, which is a French island located in the South Indian Ocean, suffered the hit of Cyclone Chido in December of 2024. This island is a French department, but is also considered an EU outermost region, and it's highly biodiverse. Therefore, one of their main economic activities is fisheries. So today, I'm going to talk about two topics in Mayotte, fisheries and biodiversity conservation. I didn't took them as separate topics, but I gathered them together and I consider them as blue economy. So in Mayotte, something that we have to take in consideration is that the fishery sector is not structured. However, there's a lot of fishing activity. We can find two types of fisheries. The first one is a small-scale fisheries, and the second one is industrial fisheries. And the industrial fisheries is not that well developed, but the small-scale fisheries, we can find some artisanal fisheries, which has a commercial activity, and we can also find some subsistence fisheries. And then for the biodiversity conservation, in 2010, there was a MPA that was established, and that is called the Parc Naturel Marin, and it covers the entire exclusive economic zone of Mayotte. So my objective was to analyze the impact of Cyclone Chido as a catalyst or as inhibitor for long-term policies in the fishery sectors, but also in the biodiversity conservation in Mayotte. So as a hypothesis, I propose that while Cyclone Chido attract the attention of policymakers in Mayotte, the prevailing constraints related to financial constraints, institutional constraints, social constraints still prioritized short-term recovery in the fishery sectors, but also in the biodiversity conservation sector. So to test that, I first did a literature review and for this literature review, I took scientific reports, but also grade literature. And then I did some semi-structured interview. And these interviews, I did them with institutions and with field actors. So for the institutions, I consider like private and public institutions that have more a role of an administrative role in the territory, but also a funding role in the territory. And then for the field actors, I consider NGOs and also fishermen representatives. So to construct this interview, I proposed 5 thematics, and within each of these thematics, I proposed some questions. And these topics are related to the hypothesis that I previously mentioned. To identify the actors that I wanted to interview, I used the MPA management plan, which actually highlights the main stakeholders of the territory. And then to analyze this interview, I used the grounded theory, which is helps to analyze qualitative data by identifying concepts and identifying interconnection between these concepts and organizing them in categories. So I used first a deductive approach that I can explain later in the questions if you want, which is basically I defined some categories that I wanted to consider. Sorry.
No worries, go for it.
Again. And then I also use an inductive approach, which was I also wanted to consider new thematics that can come up after I did the interviews. And with this methodology, I wanted to first map the main constraints of the territory, then see the connections between the different constraints. And finally, I wanted to see if there was difference between what was prioritized by the institution and what was prioritized by the field actors. So let's take a look at the results. So for the literature review, there was actually a law that was released after the hit of the cyclone. This is the program law, and it addresses constraints that were already in the territory before Cyclone Shiro. And it's important because these are constraints that are related to sustainable development. So since I'm focusing on the biodiversity conservation and fisheries sectors, I will only speak about these 2 topics. So for the biodiversity conservation, this law mentioned that it's important to continue developing the territory, but always with a focus on protecting the biodiversity. And then for the fisheries sector, what they mention is that they actually highlight the importance to structurize the sector, because this is something that is currently not happening. So by 2027, they have to have already a fishermen committee. Also, they emphasize the need to improve the access to the European Union funding. So even though this sounds amazing, right? This can stay as an instrumental learning tool, meaning that if they don't propose tangible actions, it's only going to stay in paper and it's not going to help to develop the territory. So for the interviews, I conducted a total of 20 interviews. And what you can see in this graph is in the x-axis, you can find the different sectors that I interview. And then in the y-axis is the number of interviewees. In yellow, you can see the people that came from metropolitan France, and in blue, the people that came from Mayotte. So as you can see, there's a lack of local people that actually work in the institutions. And then I wanted to see which constraint was the main mention throughout the interviews. So what you can see here, x-axis, the different research categories that I used to analyze the interviews, and then y-axis, the frequency of those categories. So for both institutions and field actors, the institutional constraints were the ones that were mentioned the most. Something that was interesting is that I actually find significant difference between what was prioritized by the field actors and what was prioritized by the institutions. And this difference, it's mainly present with the financial constraints. For instance, for the field actors, this was a topic that came super often and that they were really worried about. But for the institution, it wasn't a topic that they mentioned that much. And about Shiro's role, for something that it's also interesting is that for the institutions, Shiro presented more of a negative role, while for the field actors, for the institution, Shiro presented more of a catalyst role for the territory, while for the field actor, it presented more of an inhibitor role. Finally, I wanted to see the link between the different categories. So I did a similarity map. So something just to keep in mind and to understand this map is that if the categories are closer together, or if they have like a thick line, it means that the frequency of overlapping is high. But what is overlapping? Is basically if they are mentioned together, okay? in one segment of the interview. So the highest overlap was shown with the institutional constraints and temporality category, and this is basically because of the code turnover. So in Mayotte, there's a lot of turnover, meaning that there's a bunch of people that come from metropolitan France to work in Mayotte, but they only stay in their jobs for 2 or 3 years and then they leave. And this actually caused a disruption of the projects that are already ongoing. Also, the category temporality show overlap with the other category, and this is basically because I regroup all the segments where a relationship with time was mentioned. And then I did exactly the same, but with the codes. So this is like, I had the categories, and then for each category, I have different codes. The colors that you see here represent the categories where these codes belong to, okay? So the code Building Back Better, it's a code that is linked to seeing Shiro as a catalyst for the territory. So after Shiro, we're gonna build back better the territory. However, these show overlap with lack of communication and top-down decisions, meaning that this vision of building back better the territory is mainly a top institutional level vision, and it's not translated to a vision that the local community had. If we translate this to the fishery sector, for example, there's a need, if they want to structurize the sector, there's a need to have an ongoing communication between the top institutional level and the local community. For instance, in Portugal, they showed that the lack of structuration of the fishery sector difficulted the access of the fishermen to the decision-making process. And in Brazil, they showed that a lack of communication between the top level caused also a lack of compliance with the policy. And why is that? Basically, the institutions blame the fishermen for the depletion of the natural resources, and the fishermen thought that the law that was being applied was extreme for them. There's also a cultural asymmetry in Mayotte, meaning that there's a shortage of local administrative personnel. And what this means is that since people come from the metropole, they have other ideas, and maybe the decisions and the laws that are being applied by them are so extreme and are rigid for the territory and do not correspond to the context of Mayotte. Another co-occurrence was shown between divisive society and negative vision. And Mayotte is a territory with a highly immigration rate. And this immigration is represented also in the fishery sectors. A significant portion of the workforce for the fishery sector in Mayotte consists of fishermen that come from other places. And this actually creates some conflict between the local fishermen, but also the foreigner fishermen. In Ghana, what they show is that when the government implemented more right-based regimes, this lowered the amount of conflict between the foreigner fishermen and also the local fishermen, and furthermore, enhanced and strengthened the fishery sector in the territory. So for my limitations, so first, I couldn't interview the local elected officials, so that's one limitation. Then there's some people that I interviewed that were not in the territory before Shiro. And then, of course, as Amy also mentioned, there's a potential risk of subjectivity while I was analyzing the interviews. So is it Shiro a catalyst? Yes, if we take the state vision. What happened after Shiro, there was a release of fund for the territory. There was some synergies that were strengthened, and there was also like policy that was released in order to sustainable develop the territory. However, this is not connected to to the needs of the local community, or maybe this is not well communicated to the local community. Also, Shiro hit the island in 2024, which is pretty recent. So we actually are gonna see the role of these policies that were released in a couple of years to come. So for now, we cannot conclude if it was a catalyst or if it was an inhibitor. So I just wanted to thank my supervisors, Adrian Comte, Georgetta Stoica, Stephanie Diagata, and Mathieu Ledouf, and the IRD, and obviously the MARRES team.
Congratulations, Gabriela. So we are going with the questions the other way around as just before. So we'll start with you, Guillaume, and then going to Emna.
Hello again. Nice to see you again, Gabriela. Same disclaimer, we were colleagues, and so conflict of interest.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So, well, congrats on this work. You didn't choose easy internship topics, whether for the first year or the second one, but you did great. Congrats on that. You are ready for your professional career with a lot of you chose difficult paths. Yeah.
As you're saying that there is someone else saying hi.
Yeah, another blue seat. Yeah.
He hasn't started asking the question.
So yes, my first question would be about I would like to see if there are some way of linking your first internship topic with this one, because because as you said, after such catastrophic event, so there is a need to have a long-term vision, and there is a need to change policies, but there is also the question of funding both the repair of a lot of stuff that have been destroyed, but as well there is a need to fund resilience of such territory under climate change especially. And during your first year at Blue Seeds, you work on a not very easy topic about insurance on coastal areas in the Med, especially to work on this question of how do we fund resilience, and how will the question of insuring coastal infrastructure and even insuring ecosystem would be a raising topic. And I know that in some other context, especially in Mexico and in Jamaica, there has been some test of parametric insurance for to protect coral reef. So I wanted to know if you have thought about some ways of using the topic of your first internship into this question of the issues you have seen in Mayotte. Sorry, you are not expecting this kind of question, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a strategy that can bring a lot of money to the territory. The thing with Mayotte, maybe let me know if I answer you the question, because I'm going to focus on the territory. The thing with Mayotte is, what I actually saw is that there's not a lack of financial resources. Like, there's money. The problem is how they access the local community, the money that is already there in the territory. I think that I talked with one of the institutions, and like the rate of consuming those resources are like 20%. So it's pretty low. So it's not a lack of resources. However, so that's the first part. Like, regarding funding for that specific territory, it's not a problem right now. But obviously, maybe it's going to be in the future. But of course, Mayotte, for example, it's a lagoon, basically has a lagoon. So you have like the coral reef around the island, and then another coral reef that, like farther away. And it protects the island, and everyone, even like the locals also told me that without that reef, it will be like, it will have been worse, like the heat of the cyclone. So taking into consideration that, the coral reef and the example that is going on in Mexico, where they use insurance to finance the conservation of the reef, I think that Mayotte is suitable for that. The problem with Mayotte is that, it's not a problem, but the context in Mayotte is that, for example, in Mexico, there's tourism. There's a lot of tourism there. So actually, the hotels there are the ones that pay to get the insurance. So they create like a fund to get the insurance. in Mayotte, there's no tourism. There's like 2 big hotels there. So for now, I think that models that we already know might not be suitable. But with the ecosystem services that we have already there, probably we can find another type of mechanism to fund the conservation in the island. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yes, that answered my question. Maybe a second one, or
maybe
no?
coming back.
Okay, after. Okay, yes. Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, Emna.
My turn.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Prepared.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriella. It's a huge effort in data collection, in synthesizing this data into comprehensive graphs, very well explained and very interesting results. So congratulations. At the very beginning of your presentation, you spoke about marine protected areas with fishing or artisanal and industrial fishing. But I couldn't see much of the results focusing on both. I had the impression that it was more general and focused on fishing sector. But can you detail, like, what are your interesting results regarding the marine protected area also?
I didn't analyze them individually. I analyzed all the answers as a whole, because the interview was constructed with general questions to be applied for both type of stakeholders. But like something that I don't have a graph to show you, but something, for example, that the stakeholders related to the MPA mentioned a lot was actually the funding issue, because right now, as I mentioned, there's money in Mayotte, but to access that money, it's kind of hard. If I focus on the NGOs working on that, if I focus on the MPA, since it's managed by an institution that belongs to the French department from the French state, they have funding all the time. But that funding depends on the president, on the government that you have right now. So it's very vulnerable. It depends. For example, right now they have funding, but maybe with the next elections that will change. So that was a topic that came up super often for them. That one of the main constraints in the island is the vulnerability that they have in the funding situation. That right now they're good, but tomorrow they don't know. So if they want to create projects with a long-term vision, they have to create short-term projects and then chain them together. So in that way, they can do like a long-term project. So I will focus on funding constraints. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for answering that. So, so about the impact of the Chido on the MPA, how would you describe that?
With the MPA, well, I talked
or to the ecosystem services that the MPA is providing.
Okay. Do you mean if they decreased, if they increased?
Yes.
If they...
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. I didn't talk. That was not part of my interviews. But what I talked with them is that after Chido, they create more synergies with the universities, for example. So what they do right now is after Chido, they develop some project to track and monitor the ecosystem services that were offered by the MPAs. So right now they're currently in the phase of knowing actually how much was the damage and what they can do in order, if they want to do passive restoration or if they want just to do active restoration. But like after Chido, it was more creating synergy, and right now there's an ongoing, there's some projects that are ongoing and to track that effect on the ecosystem services.
Okay, great. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Na. Luisa.
My first question is about studies. You talked about the review, so maybe I missed something. Did you find any study quantifying, for example, the impact on the ecosystem or on some economical activity? I mean, I know that the section was probably very recent, so maybe some studies are in publication or progress, but did you find something really about ecosystems or the economic, I like numbers.
There's one study that talks about that, the economic loss related to ecosystem services, but I don't have in mind exactly the numbers. But yeah, there's one. And there's another one that is here, that I cited here, that it mentioned the loss, but this is not a study. Actually, it's more a publication, like a great literature that was published by the French state, which actually calculated the economic loss for each economic sector, so the agriculture and so on. I have it here, up here. So for example, this 244 million of euros, this is only for the agricultural sector. Yeah, but for the ecosystem service part, I know that there's one paper and I can come back to you after, but I don't have the numbers yet.
Okay. And my second question is if you can go back to the graph where you had the field people and
the institutions?
Yes.
This one?
Yes, this, for example. And in the previous graph, you show the different, also the administration funding, fisheries, and biodiversity conservation.
Yeah.
It is also very interesting. And my question is, in the second graph, you had no differences, in between institutions and field actors. If you were plotting the same kind of graph, for example, with the different categories, biodiversity, do you think you would have the same results?
No. No, definitely not. I think that, for example, between the biodiversity conservation sector, so NGOs and the MPA, the answers were different than what the fishermen said, and they focus more on financial constraints mainly. So my report, I focused only on fisheries, and this difference, I didn't find it only if I focus on fisheries. So that means that when I added the biodiversity conservation sector is when this popped up. So it's related to the biodiversity, yeah.
Good for you, Risa?
Yes.
Okay, so we can go back to Florence and finish with thesis.
Yeah, congratulations, Gabriela, for the impressive quality and quantity of the work you conducted.
Florence, just wait a second. There were some issues with the microphone. I almost cut you. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I was just congratulating Gabriela for the...
This time it's not my fault. Okay, it seems we just lost temporarily Florence, so I guess we can go to you, Aziz, and I'm sure Florence will come back.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Florence is back.
I was going to compliment you.
You're going to have a lot of compliments. So I guess, Florence, I have to find you back, but here you can go ahead.
Third time's the charm, hopefully. Yeah, congrats again for the great work you did. And I was curious regarding the kind of constraints you had to some of the interviews that you couldn't collect all of the ones that you would have liked to have with the local elected officials and other actors. If you were to redo your internship all over again, is there anything you would have done differently to try and ensure you could get these interviews or to improve the overall quality of your interviews?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I went to Mayotte mid-April, which left me with not that many time to interview everyone that I wanted. So I think that more time, because I wanted to also include the tourism sector, and I actually have some interviews with the tourism sector that I wasn't able to finish analyzing, but they're still there. I'm gonna continue doing it, but still there's some actors that were not included. So definitely time, I think so. Yeah, I think that more time. I would like to have more time, and because the interviews, each one took between 40 to 1 hour and a half, each one person. So this this internship, it's like, if you want to actually get the people to open up with you, it's not an interview of 10 minutes. So yeah, I will say that.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks. And regarding one of the other problems that you highlighted, which was this cultural asymmetry, the lack of local representation in state governing bodies, is there anything you could recommend to try remediate this?
I mean, I think that as my master thesis is on time, this is also related to time. So one of the main reasons why there's so many people from Metropole that has that they have a role on the institution is because there's a shortage of of people with the skills, let's say, to work, to have these jobs. So right now there's an university in Mayotte, and they're trying to tailor the license, everything that they offer to the needs of the territory. So I think that it's not something that I can do individually, but it's more like a perspective that I have. So if they continue to reinforce the education in this type of fields, maybe in a future we will see more Maore people actually working in the institutions, and in that way they're going to have like a more direct contact and more knowledge on the context, and that will improve, I will say.
Yeah,
But
that's
this-
a great perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Florence. And so
Thank you very much. Really, really interesting. On this slide, actually, I was kind of querying what Chido's role meant, but now I completely understand. This will change though over time, right? You know, these events come and go, and kind of like COVID, you know, we kind of forget. And so that vulnerability of funding is really important, because short-term focus has no relation to long-term resilience. I don't know, it's interesting. One thing you didn't kind of touch upon, and I just found it here, is the actual extent of the damage and the comparison between nations closer. So the total money was 450 million euros. 40 people died, 5,000 injuries. The closest country, Comoros next, had 0 fatalities, 5 injuries. Huge difference. Like, so my question is, what went wrong? Like, what is the difference between these places? And
between the Comoros and Mayotte?
yeah. I mean, one is funded by the 6th richest country in the world. The other is not.
I mean, I don't want to say something that is wrong, because I never thought about what was different in France. And I don't know about, but I know that the context of Comores, it's a little bit different and it's hard. So I don't know how did they get the data of their, you know.
But also the other countries around 0 fatalities, the closest was Mozambique, 120 fatalities, only 5 million deaths.
I think that when Chido past Mayotte was the peak of the cyclone, so it damaged a lot. So I think that one part that, the other thing is like in Mayotte, there's a high rate of immigration. So I'm not saying that is wrong, it's just that the way that, for example, houses are built, it's not safe. So it's just like, how do you say, like metal layers put on top of each other. So if a cyclone passed, it was 250 kilometers per hour, the speed of the cyclone. So this will cause more damage. And I think that, for example, Comores and Mozambique, the rate of immigration and of building like this, that I'm not sure. This is something that I will say and to answer, but might be lower. So I think that one part is that Mayotte was not prepared. There's a lot of people that are like in vulnerable conditions. I'm not saying the other places not, but it's just what I will say. But to be honest, it wasn't something that I thought about. It's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So let's open the floor to questions for the last time today. To you.
Question, and maybe I understood it wrong. I just had, do you have an idea or an explanation why there's no people from Mayotte in the administration?
Yeah, is that what I was mentioning, is that it's not like they're not. I met people that actually work in the administration. But the thing is, like, it's lower because in order for you to get this type of job, you need to have a master. And for example, the university, if I'm not mistaken, they don't offer, the university that there's in Maya, they don't offer masters. There's something that they're trying to do. So if you don't have a master, you're not gonna get a job in a public institution. So it's basically because the people there, they don't have the skills. It's not that they don't have the skill, but they don't have the paper, the certificate, the qualifications to be part of those jobs. But yeah, that's the only reason.
What was for you the hardest challenge when contacting the people that you had to interview?
The hardest challenge.
Hardest challenge and contacting, as personal or I mean, I think that patience and trying to not to feel bad about being insisting a lot, because that's something that you have to do. Like, I think that for some people, I sent an email like 5 times, and at the end they were like, okay, let's just do it, because you know, she's gonna
Academic.
So I think that part, like, for me, I'm also kind of introvert and a bit shy. So before having the interview, I will go to the bathroom. I will do like little job. Okay, you got this. So I think that part, like being confident and doing like, okay, I can do it, trusting my French, because, you know, for some interviews, actually, there was some part that people were talking to me, and I was like, and in my head, I was like, I'm not getting anything. And then I will listen to the transcription and read the transcription and listen to the audio. And I was like, okay, I thought that he was saying something completely different. So I think that the French part, having confidence on myself, trying to put me out there, I think that's something that for me was the hardest part. But I love it, and now I want to keep doing it. So yeah.
It's funny, this experience that both Amy and you, as 2 speakers, had of talking French outside of Metropole.
Yeah.
Last question maybe for today? You're good, you will continue the discussion tonight, maybe? Congratulations, Gabriela.
Thank you.
Merci. So that's all for today. I would like to thank again all the jury members on site and online. We were lucky to have a lot of you now today. Tomorrow morning, it's the last session, so of course you're going to be there. For you to know, so there is a breakfast before on the rooftop, so maybe you're going to be there for that too. But also you will be there to support Matilda, Valerie, Lena, and Jacob. We are going to talk about sustainable ocean innovation. See you tomorrow.